The Haunting of Hill House is a Netflix horror miniseries created by Mike Flanagan and is loosely based on the Shirley Jackson novel of the same name. While a shit ton has changed from the novel, it still managed to capture the soul of the book as well as keep a lot of the character names. Plus, the famous cup of stars make an appearance as well. Anyway, let's start the review. The premise for the show revolves around an estranged family recovering from a horrifying experience they had in their childhood home. An experience so terrible it has left a traumatic mark on each of them. And what's worse is that the house's power seems to be extending from outside its walls and affecting the family in the present. And the family is soon forced to face their traumas before the house slowly claims them one by one. This is one of my favorite kind of horror stories. A family being forced to confront the sins of the past in order to face the horrors of the present. And the reason I like these stories so much is because they have so much potential in terms of not only fleshing out your characters in a refreshing way, but while also having it play off the plot as well as making your characters feel more real. I don't want to say anything else because I'm afraid I might spoil stuff, but damn was I happy to finally get a horror film with this much character depth. I give premise an A+. Next, we will discuss characters, and holy shit, these are probably the most genuine characters I've ever seen. As someone who has had experienced some mental health problems himself, we're not going to get into that until a later time. There were a lot of the moments in the show that actually struck something in me. Specifically of when Luke and Eleanor are worrying about what will happen to them in the future. These are anxieties that I've had myself, and the way it's done in the show is very disturbing since they also seem to imply that the house is causing it. Also, it's kind of disturbing to hear young children have such self-deprecative thoughts, so that really added to the horror/dread as well. I really wanted to see all of these characters survive because of all this, because the way their traumas are demonstrated are done in a depressing yet very horrifying way. I give characters an A+. I don't really have anything much to say about the humor, and part of that is because this is a story about mental health. There isn't really any room to be funny when you are dealing with the subject. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were some sweet moments between the siblings that made me chuckle, but that's because I was happy to see them have some peace, not because anything funny was happening. And even then, sometimes freaky shit would be happening in those scenes in the background. Anyway, I give humor an NA rating. Next is acting, and wow, it's just about all I can say. This had some of the best performances I've seen in a while. Everyone gave it their all in this, and that only added to the horror because that ultimately made me care for their characters more. Most notably that of Julian Hilliard and Violet McGraw, who did a fantastic job of portraying kids whose mental health was on edge, and also they sound like they are actually terrified, not just scared, but flat out terrified about these anxieties. So terrified that it keeps them up late at night. And that only felt more authentic because it actually felt like an anxiety breakdown. With a breakdown, like I said, you aren't just a little scared, it can sometimes push you into a panic attack, and these two did a good job with that. Overall, I give acting an A+. Finally, directing. Mike Flanagan does a fantastic job in terms of narration as well as cinematography and execution. This had an amazing premise, as said before, and I think Mike does a fantastic job of executing it because he makes sure that you are familiar enough with the characters as well as all the sins that endlessly torment them. Also, the way some sequences are shot were done in a pretty scary way since the camera wouldn't automatically go to the supernatural happening. Sometimes you had to let yourself discover it, but holy shit is it effective when you see it. The ghosts don't really do anything when you see them, but just their presence alone is enough to disturb you. Also, this is a very well told story because the horror and the theme of mental health play off each other in a very refreshing way. I give directing an A+. Overall, The Haunting of Hill House is probably the scariest thing I've seen since 2018's Hereditary. I have seen the original The Haunting from 1963, and I have read the original source material by Shirley Jackson, but while the 1963 version does a good job in terms of subtlety as well as keeping things to the imagination, I do have the controversial opinion of liking the remake not the other remake, but this one a little bit better, only because the characters are more fleshed out, and it provides an updated version of the original story while also keeping its spirit. I give The Haunting of Hill House an A+. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and sub for more content.